Welcome back into the Arrowhead of Pride draft room. I am Stephen Serda, joined by my guys Ron Kopp Jr. and Caleb James. Kramer Santon in the background, helping us keep this thing afloat as he always is. Night 2 of the NFL draft. I'm not outside, and there's no windows in this room, so I can't really confirm that it is raining. But last time we were outside, it looked like it was going to rain. So Kansas City Chiefs fans might be getting kind of wet tonight. If you've ever been to a rock fest, you know how muddy Liberty Memorial can get when it rains really hard. I have seen some pretty gross things go down at Rockfest. So I'm kind of in on the chaos of that happening tonight. So let's see how much it rains here in Kansas City. But obviously, I think as you guys heard, if you checked out our 4-hour long podcast from night 1 of the NFL draft, we were pretty happy with the Chiefs round 1, despite the board kind of not falling exactly how we wanted it to late in the first round for them. But you guys, it's day 2 of the NFL draft. Still a lot of talented players on the board. And I think this is the time where we knew the Kansas City Chiefs were trying to move up in the first round. We knew they were making calls and it just didn't really work out. I think this is the time where, and the night of the draft, where we could really see them try to be super aggressive and make some pretty significant moves.
Yeah, no, I think that the fact that they didn't trade up last night, even though I think a lot of the reports, a lot of the talk around the Chiefs was that they really wanted to, right? I think they really did want to. You know, Quentin Johnson was the first name that kind of came up, but there were multiple guys. I do think they were wanting to move up for any of those receivers. Zay Flowers as well obviously went right after Quentin Johnson. And then we hear about, obviously, that they were trying to go for Mozzie Smith with the Dallas Cowboys, and the Cowboys obviously denied them because they wanted to take him himself. They wanted to make a big move on day 1, and the fact that they couldn't, I bet they wanted to move back, obviously trade back, but I think there was a little bit to maybe Clark Hunt wanting them to make a pick on day 1, especially if they wanted to take the local guy anyway. I think that was a great way to end the day 1, night 1, but it's going to be even a more fun day today, boys. I'm excited about what they're going to do because the fact that they didn't trade up last night, I do think there's a chance we could see a trade up here in round 2 or round 3, but round 2 would be the more exciting one, Caleb, I bet.
Yeah, and they didn't go out and, make like that splash trade that everyone wants them to go make. But what they did do at pick 31, they got a really reliable, very young player who is still ascending as far as his skill level, his athletic ability, and all that. Felix Ndiki Uzoma, he is going to come in here and possibly be the day 1 starter at either the weak side linebacker, or not weak side linebacker, weak side defensive end. And the way, I went home last night and I just couldn't stop thinking about the picks. So I did what, film guys do. I started watching film until I fell asleep. And you go in there and, some of the stuff we mentioned last night, I'm watching his game versus Alabama. And he's playing against Bama. He's going against Tyler Steen, who's going to get drafted today by somebody. But, they're having him line up in these tight formations. He's lined up in like real close to the line of scrimmage, and they're going full contain because they're playing Bryce Young. And they just don't want him to get out there and, make a play on them. But the first time they let him line up in like a 7 technique, closer to a wide 9 maybe, he comes ripping off the line of scrimmage, swats down Steen's hands, and Steen wasn't even expecting it just because, he'd been rushing in tight all game. He is much better fit. He is a much better scheme fit for what he's going to be doing here in Kansas City as opposed to what they had him doing at K-State. I don't think there's any reason anyone should be mad about this pick because they got younger, more athletic, and they got a lot more physical up front on the defensive line with that selection.
Well, and I think that's the big thing too here is that they got young, and it's not like he's only 21 years old. Like he's going to be a 21-year-old rookie for the Kansas City Chiefs. Like that's pretty incredible. Like getting players that are that young and that like he could still put on size. He's still got all kinds of developing to do and maturing to do as the Chiefs try to build him into a starting caliber NFL player. And, Caleb goes home after a long night, after a 4-hour straight of broadcast, and he's breaking down film and checking out the Chiefs draft pick. I'm just crushing beers in the shower, like trying to catch a little bit of a buzz so I can go to sleep because I'm wired after the NFL draft. But it was fun, and I was excited. Like I know we all really wanted Nolan Smith, and Nolan Smith would have been, I think, a home run pick for them, but there was just no way like he was going to get past the Philadelphia Eagles. And I am a firm believer in the Chiefs would have traded out of the first round if this thing was not in Kansas City. Like I think I absolutely think that they would have. I think that Veach was taking calls, and I think that Clark Hunt was like, you are not robbing me of making this draft pick announcement.
He was pumped up.
Yeah, first round of the NFL draft in Kansas City. Yeah, and go back. You can find that on the Arrowhead Pride Twitter page. So at Arrowhead Pride, we got the video of Clark announcing the pick, and you can hear him like really at the end. He's like, I gotta give him something because Mahomes and Kelsey keep coming out here, and they get the crowd all fired up, and everybody loves them. Then I come out here, and everybody's kind of quiet and. Clark's like, this is my city too. I want to get them fired up. So it's funny. I was cracking up when I saw it last night. So I highly encourage you to go check that out at Arrowhead Pride. But I also want to let you guys know we are not going to go live for 4 hours again tonight. That was a ton of fun, and I don't know if physically we are up to it again. But we had a ton of fun with you guys last night. So I really encourage you to check out that entire first round. We broke down every single pick in the first round of the NFL draft on that podcast from last night. But tonight, we're going to kind of talk through some of the Chiefs' needs here as we start the second round, some of the best players available and the guys that they should be looking at. And then we're probably going to take a little bit of a break until the Chiefs make a move or it seems like they're getting close to actually making a pick. That way we got some other moving parts going on tonight at AP, and we're doing a ton of stuff and still cranking out just incredible coverage for you all weekend long. We'll be down here tomorrow as well on the final day of the draft. So we got plenty of stuff for you at arrowheadpride.com and on the Arrowhead Pride Podcast Network. But Ron, you put up an article today, the best fits for the Chiefs on day 2 by position of need. And I want to talk about some of the players. Obviously, wide receiver is one of the positions that we've talked about the most. And last night we were super excited because it seemed like the wide receiver group was falling exactly how we wanted it to fall for the Kansas City Chiefs. And it just did not work out that way. But there's still some talented players. And in your article, you put North Carolina wide receiver Joshua Downs, Tennessee wide receiver Jalen Hyatt that we talked about quite a bit last night, Tennessee wide receiver Cedric Tillman. I know Rocky is a huge Cedric Tillman fan. Cincinnati wide receiver Tyler Scott, SMU wide receiver Rashee Rice, Oklahoma wide receiver Marvin Mims, and of course our guy Ole Miss wide receiver Jonathan Mingo, who I think we all like and could see him as a good potential fit for the Kansas City Chiefs. But let's just kind of talk about those guys, why you have them ranked, where you have them ranked, and how you think how aggressive the Chiefs need to be in trying to land one of these wide receivers.
Yeah, we talked about Jalen Hyatt a lot as a potential first-round pick. I was not a fan of him as a potential first-round pick. I really feel like it's just not the right value for a player like that. You can find guys maybe a little later in the draft. You mentioned Tyler Scott, Marvin Mims, some of those guys that can do maybe a similar skill set. But we're getting to the point where, yeah, if he is there at 63 or, maybe even later somehow, I doubt that with his kind of speed. But we are getting to the point where it does become maybe good value to get one of those guys. So I definitely look out for that. But I will say, I don't really want to see that necessarily. I think this team needs somebody as a receiver that can win on the perimeter, that can win through physical coverage, that can make catches over the middle in traffic. I think they're missing that with the absence of Juju Smith-Schuster. The only receiver additions we've seen this offseason are Richie James and Justin Watson. And so now we got the Chiefs, looking at potentially receivers like Cedric Tillman, you mentioned Jonathan Mingo. I think those two are the fits. Rashee Rice, though, is also kind of that X receiver type that can win through physical coverage. I'm just not a huge fan of his consistency as a player. I'd love to see Tillman or Mingo, and it may mean trading up. But I think since they didn't make that move last night, they have that extra 4th-round pick in their back pocket to move up at least maybe 10, 12 spots. I think you could see that possibly happen if they like Tillman or Mingo enough. But again, I wouldn't be too surprised if they do want to touch on the speed now that we're getting to the point where I think that Jalen Hyatt at 6'3" would be good value.
And Caleb, I want to get your take on that group of wide receivers. But by the way, the Pittsburgh Steelers did not trade out of 32, despite rumors that they were seriously interested in moving back. They took cornerback Joey Porter Jr., somebody that we talked about last night, talented player. I think he's going to fit in well with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They need some help in that secondary. So that's a big pick for them. The Tennessee Titans have apparently traded up with the Arizona Cardinals to number 33. We don't have the details on that trade yet.
It's got to be Will Levis, right?
It's got to be at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it would make a ton of sense for the Titans to go up and get Will Levis. And I mean, at that value too, where we were talking about them taking him in the top 15 and to get him in the second round, that seems like a pretty good deal for a team that took a chance on Malik Willis last season and has already lost a lot of faith in him. But getting back to the wide receiver group and Caleb, like kind of what Ron was saying, I love the speed and I love the explosiveness, and I think that's what Andy Reid loves, and I think that's what he generally covets in his wide receivers. But it was kind of nice last season to have a guy like Juju Smith-Schuster who was so strong and who could actually like go up and get the football on those like back shoulder sideline throws, because the Chiefs haven't had a lot of those guys in recent years. And it would be really nice to have one of those like AJ Brown style of wide receivers with a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. And so I'm curious how you feel about this wide receiver group. And do you feel like the Chiefs should kind of stray away from what Andy Reid typically likes and just the speed guys, the guys that can take the top off of a defense?
Yeah, and with that, two names I'll bring up who I think would fit into that kind of a mold would be, and Will Levis just got taken, by the way, by the Titans. That pick made a whole lot of sense for both sides, and he quickly went off the board. But just to reiterate on that a little bit, Jonathan Mingo and Cedric Tillman are two guys I'm keeping an eye on day two who could maybe be that bigger, larger, receiver type. Tillman would be a guy who comes in. He's going to need a little bit of polishing with his route running, but he is a physical guy. He's going to be able to box people out. He's going to be able to go up for a lot of those back shoulder fades, kind of like you saw with Juju. And then with John Mingo, I think in some of our episodes of our film room, we said he might be like a little bit slower version of Sammy Watkins. In some instances, he's a guy, he's got yak, he's a big time yak guy, and they used him in a lot of different ways. He wasn't just primarily a receiver. He can block. He's a physical kind of guy, so he's got all that going. I think they could maybe even run him kind of like how they run with Amon-Ra St. Brown up in Detroit. I think that might be a little bit of a comp for him also. And he's a guy that could fall, but his range is so wild. You've seen him ranked anywhere from, I'm seeing him like they're saying he could go by pick 35 now, and you're seeing some people saying he's not even a third round pick. So there's not much of a consensus on him, but we've been big fans of his.
Yeah, no, I really feel like if the Chiefs want the kind of receiver that they've been missing since Sammy Watkins, because I think the key point with the Sammy Watkins comparison and what they've been missing is Sammy Watkins was a legitimate threat with the ball in his hands after the catch. And I think Juju had some of that too, but just even not to the same extent. I think Sammy was special with the ball in his hands. He was almost like a running back. I think they're trying to replicate that to an extent with Sky Moore. I think he can do some of that, but he's just not the big body type to really, fully, truly do a lot of the things we're talking about, catching through traffic, catching over guys. And that's not as important in the Chiefs system, but they have the other guys to complement right now. They have the deep throw with MVS. They have the slot receiver types, the yak guys in terms of, Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney. It would just make sense, if you're building your basketball team, your wide receiver, core. We like to say, you need your power forward, your point guard, your shooting guard, all that. We need a power forward. They have the guards. They have kind of the playmakers. They need kind of that bigger body to, again, catch contested catches. Over the middle. Get open through physical coverage. I just think they're missing that kind of right now. And that's why we're big on Mingo and Tillman.
So in your article for Arrowhead Pride, like out of this group of wide receivers, like who's the guy you'd be most shocked to see them take?
Ooh, that's a good one. Honestly, if I had to choose one, I'd probably say Joshua Downs, because I do think he doesn't have the vertical speed maybe that some of the other guys do, but he's also, he's a smaller slot receiver that doesn't have maybe the size, that kind of physicality. The other guys, like a Rice or a Tillman or a Mingo have. But, if they were considering, just any offensive skill position play, a guy like Sam Laporta made a lot of sense for them, but he just went off the board to the Detroit Lions at the top of the second round here. A guy that, has that receiving ability, that playmaking ability as a tight end. We've been high on him, all three of us, me, Caleb, and Nate. And so it's sad to see him go. But again, I these receivers are slipping more and more down. We're 3 picks in. We haven't seen one yet.
The Lions have just been the kings of this draft of taking guys that you think are going to be available later so far. I feel like that's all 3 of their picks. You're like, wait, what already? And I know you guys have talked about Sam Laporta a lot as a guy that was really being mocked to the Chiefs a ton this offseason. So that's interesting to see. I want to move on to the offensive tackle group. I think that's outside of wide receiver. That's obviously the next big position of need for the Kansas City Chiefs. So tell us a little bit about some of the guys in this group and guys that you think Chiefs fans should really be aware of.
Well, we're talking offensive tackles. It's kind of a weird position the Chiefs are in right now because I do think the second round is not necessarily the greatest pocket. Brett Veach likes to use the word pockets. Zones, I guess, hot zones in the draft for certain positions. I don't think offensive tackle has a pretty good hot zone in the second round. I think you kind of missed out on that first wave. Anton Harrison was the last kind of top tier offensive tackle in my opinion. He went a few picks before in the first round. And now you're kind of looking at maybe a Dawan Jones as kind of that only guy that you really would feel good about, plug and playing right away if you were to draft him on day two. Other guys, in consideration on day two, according to the consensus board, you have Matthew Berger on the Syracuse offensive tackle, kind of a stouter guy, maybe not that necessarily the best fit for the Chiefs. Cody Mauch, Blake Freeland are up there right now, but I just think they have too much development to go in terms of being pass protectors. That's why I think it would make sense, Dawan Jones, if they could get him, but he's probably not going to be available for them. That's why it would maybe have to be like a Jalen Duncan, the Maryland offensive tackle, or Nick Saldiveri, the Old Dominion offensive tackle. But both those guys are more like third-round picks. So all that to say is I wouldn't necessarily expect them to attack offensive tackle in the second round. It's just not the right value right now at the position.
Yeah, but then you get into a point where if they think they're going to get a tackle, we've been through this in some mocks we did, you get to a point where if you wait too long on tackle, there's a chance there's a big run and they all end up off the board before 95 rolls back around. But the two guys who I've been seeing, have been popping up all over today, who've been like the hot names, have been Mauch, and really that's interesting because there's still no consensus. Some view him as a tackle, some view him as an interior player. There's really no general consensus on where he's going to go. But with Dawan Jones, you have an athlete of considerable size. And, some of that size brings a lot of questions about whether, is he going to come in and is it going to be like another Mekhi Becton situation where he's consistently hurt? Is it going to be a situation, where he just can't stay on the field, or if he gets hurt, he's not going to be able to recover as quickly because of his size? But he is a phenomenal athlete for being as big as he is. The Orlando Brown comparisons I've seen people make to him, I disagree with those wholeheartedly. He is he's built far differently than Orlando Brown was, and he's, much quicker. He ran like his split in the 40-yard dash was about 1.9. Orlando's was a 2. So you'd be improving some athleticism, and he does have the ability to come in and be, that starter at right tackle. But, again, some of the questions with him, how's he going to go against speed rushers, coming in from wide angles he's not used to? He's got some fundamental things he needs to clean up with his footwork also, but he seems like a pretty solid prospect in either the second or third round, at least the way the board is falling. I don't know if the Chiefs would be in on him, though.
And by the way, the Las Vegas Raiders have just traded up in the second round. They trade with the Indianapolis Colts. The Raiders trade pick 38 and 141 to jump up to pick 35. So see what the Raiders are doing. It seemed like they were going to be in play to do what the Tennessee Titans just did. So curious to see who they're trading up to go after here. And we'll keep you updated there. But like I mentioned, we're going to keep this one a little short. We're going to cut back a little bit tonight, but we will be back live again as soon as the Chiefs are on the clock, and hopefully after they trade up in the second round to go get an impact player. But our final two position groups, and we'll start with the defensive tackles. And I'm curious if I'm correct in saying like this, I think is like the most intriguing group for me, right? Like I feel like there's a few guys in this group of defensive tackles that could fit really nicely with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm a huge Keanu Benton guy. He's the best defensive tackle still on the board. He was my number 2 defensive tackle. I ranked him over Mozzie Smith, who went in the first round. I just think he has the capabilities to play next to Chris Jones on the defensive line, be that nose tackle type. I know there are, he is a tall player. He does have some pad height issues at times, but I think he can make up for that with his long arms, his big, stout frame, just a massive human being, really hard to stay in front of. So he's my guy, but it is an interesting thing, man, because because you're going to see a guy like Gervon Dexter be available at 63 possibly, and he's kind of this ball of clay, really good athlete at his size. He came into the combine about 6'6", 310, but had the 4.8, 840, which was impressive for his size. I think the Chiefs might value his length and his size at what he does, but Benton actually does have the longer arms, and that's where I come back to Benton continually. I just feel like he is, the best prospect for them at defensive tackle. But let's be realistic. He's a really good player. He may not last very much longer. And so if we're going to be more realistic, I think a guy like Siaki Ika, the Baylor defensive tackle, or Zach Pickens from South Carolina, both of those guys should go a little later, could be available for the Chiefs at 63. But I'd watch on Ika. I feel like with his, he's kind of lost some steam over the draft process. If he does start to slip a little more, get into later in the third round, he's a plug-and-play nose tackle right away. You're not worried about him, against double teams at all. He's going to eat him up. He's a huge dude. You're worried about maybe his ceiling as an overall player. But I think he has some movement ability where he could develop. And again, he's going to be an instant starter for you right away. Just watch out. I think if he slips maybe a little too far into round 3, the Chiefs could move up from that round 3 position they have and go grab him and get an immediate starter.
Yeah, and at one point I think I described Siaki Ika as a buffet on wheels because he is a large individual and he is designed for plugging up A and B gaps. And when you look at the kind of defensive tackles Joe Cullen is typically coached in his defense, he is looking for like these massive space eaters who can just take on double teams and let linebackers run free. An example of that would be Brandon Williams. They bring him in to end the season, but they spent a lot of time together in Detroit, or not Detroit. They've spent a lot of time together in Baltimore. He coached him most of his entire career. I think he could be looking for a nose tackle like that. Obviously, Derek Nottie comes back to the roster, but his playing time, it's not going to be guaranteed at this point just because of his he hasn't been able to produce the last season or so, last couple of seasons at, the rate that he was earlier in his career. So I do think that defensive tackle position is still something they need. I'm getting real worried Benton might be off the board here soon, but we're going to have to just wait and hold our breath on that one.
And we mentioned that the Raiders traded up, and it was to take tight end Michael Mayer. We're on a tight end run right now. That was a position group that we talked a lot about last night, where kind of surprised in one of the more talented tight end classes that we've seen in a long time that there wasn't more of them that actually went in the first round. But it seems like that was a high value position. And I understand the need there for the Las Vegas Raiders. So moving on to our final position group that you had in terms of prospects to watch for the Kansas City Chiefs, Ron. Well, we're talking about tight ends now, or just there's a lot of other players. So let's just talk about some of those players. I'm struggling right now. I'm tired. All right. I'm tired. All right. Chiefs fans. So give me a break. Let's talk about your favorite players still left in the second round.
Yeah. Well, I highlighted Tyjae Spears, the running back from Tulane, as a guy that is an intriguing player amongst a group of tight ends and running backs that the Chiefs could pick from. Now, I did highlight Sam Laporta as one of those options. We've seen him go off the board already here in the second round, but I do think if the board falls to a point where they don't have a defensive tackle they necessarily like in round 2, they don't have an offensive tackle they don't like in round 2, they don't have a receiver they like in round 2, I think one way they could kind of, maybe supplement that, kind of make up for maybe not getting a position of need is getting, a really good running back, in my opinion. I think he has some medical concerns. He's torn his ACL twice. This is Tyjae Spears again. But, man, when you watch him play, he is electric in the open field. He has the juice to make guys miss. He plays bigger, I think, than his size. You kind of surprised when you look at his combine size, and I should be able to pull it up here, but he looks like he'd be like 6 foot roughly, and kind of be, a bigger type of back. But then when you actually look at what size he is as a player, when he comes into the combine, he came into the combine, I am grabbing it here, at 5'10", 200 pounds, which was just surprising to me because I feel like he holds up well in pass protection. He's a good receiver. He catches well. I really feel like he could be one of the best running backs in this class in the right system. And I think he does complement Pacheco well, being that kind of pass down back. While Pacheco can kind of take the load of the carries, he can kind of just come in, play that Jerick McKinnon role. It's kind of a luxury pick, right? Having a second round pick as your running back when you're the Chiefs. But if the board falls the right way, I think he'd make an impact and improve the offense, I would say, right away.
Yeah. And I think a guy, in this range that I was looking at who is a tight end, he's yet to go. That could change very quickly at the rate that this is going. But it's Tucker Kraft from the University of South Dakota State. He's a small-time prospect, but he plays big. And what I mean by that is he's a yak guy. Now, that being said, he is a bit more of a project. He's not going to be able to come in and be like a dominant blocking tight end right away. He'll need to work on that, much like Travis Kelce did when he first got to Kansas City. But what he provides is, and you just take a look at the height and weight, 6'5", 254 pounds. He's a built guy. He's very fast. He's got a lot of yak potential, very good hands. Hasn't necessarily gone against the highest level of competition, playing in the Missouri Valley Conference, but he is a winner. They've won a lot of games up there in South Dakota. I think he'd be a great, from a personnel standpoint, just from like a culture fit, and then also, his scheme fit down the line. It would be interesting. This would be more of a pick for tomorrow as opposed to today, but I feel like they'd be setting themselves up very nicely in the future.
These picks are flying off the board right now. We are moving fast. That's what I like to see. Day 2 of the NFL draft, they're not wasting any time. They're like, oh man, we partied hard last night. Everybody had a great time. And these teams and these coaches and scouts and everybody's tired right now. So I am in favor of that. But yeah, those are the guys that we're going to be keeping close eyes on throughout the second round and the third round this evening. But like I mentioned, we'll be here, but we are going to take a little bit of a break right now, kind of wait for the Kansas City Chiefs to come up on the clock. Hopefully it's a trade up. So be on the lookout for on Arrowhead Pride's Twitter page, Facebook page, YouTube page. We will be reacting live as soon as the Chiefs are on the clock with hopefully a trade up in the second round. But if not, their late second round pick, they also have a late third round pick. But we're hoping they make some noise here on day 2 of the NFL draft. I'm Stephen Serda. That's Caleb James, Ron Kopp Jr., Kramer Sansone in the background. Thank you as always. We'll talk to you guys here in a little bit as soon as the Kansas City Chiefs are on the clock.